Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the strangest message of his life came through the ship's communication system. He nearly choked on the hot liquid as the computer's voice filled the bridge of the USS Liberty. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission on multiple frequencies. The message is in 17 different languages, none of them human. The Universal Translator is working on it now?" Jake set down his coffee cup and looked at Commander Lisa Park, who was already at her station checking the incoming data. Lisa had been his second in command for 3 years, and he had never seen her look so confused. "What does it say?" "Jake," asked Lisa read from her screen, trying not to smile. "It says, and I quote, 'Primitive species, prepare for Imperial evaluation. You will present yourselves for judgment by the Galactic Empire. Resistance is futile. Compliance is mandatory.'" Jake blinked. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. There's more." Lisa scrolled down. "They want us to submit technological assessments, cultural hierarchies, and something called tribute calculations. Oh, and they want to know how many of our people we can spare for labor duties." The bridge crew started to gather around Lisa's station. Engineer Pete Collins whistled low. "Labor duties? What is this, the 19th century?" Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's medical officer, shook her head. "This sounds like something out of a bad science fiction movie." Jake walked to the main viewing screen. "Computer, show me the source of this transmission." The screen flickered and showed empty space. Then, like something materializing from a dream, a massive ship appeared. It was huge, at least 10 times the size of the Liberty. The hull was covered in what looked like gold and silver decorations. Spikes and ornate designs covered every surface. It looked like someone had taken a normal spaceship and decided to make it as fancy as possible. "Well," Jake said slowly, "that's certainly impressive." "Impressive is one word for it," Lisa muttered. "Ridiculous is another." The communication system crackled again. "Primitive vessel, prepare to receive an Imperial representative. You will show proper respect and submission." Jake looked around at his crew. They were all trying not to laugh. "Okay, people, let's be professional here. We're making first contact with an alien civilization. This is historic. Historic and hilarious," Pete whispered. A few minutes later, the air in the center of the bridge began to shimmer. Slowly, a holographic figure materialized. The alien was tall, about 7 feet, with blue-green skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. It had 4 arms, each ending in delicate fingers with too many joints. Its head was elongated, with large eyes that seemed to glow. But what really caught everyone's attention was what it was wearing. The alien was dressed in flowing robes that seemed to serve no practical purpose. The fabric was covered in golden threads and jewels that sparkled with every movement. On its head sat a crown that was so tall and elaborate it looked like it might fall over at any moment. The crown was made of crystals and metals that formed complex patterns reaching at least 2 feet above the alien's head. "Greetings, primitive carbon-based life forms," the alien said in a voice that boomed through the bridge. "I am Admiral Zixtara of the Galactic Empire, Lord of the Outer Rim, Conqueror of 1,000 worlds, Master of the Void, and Bringer of Imperial Justice." Jake managed to keep his face straight, but it was difficult. "Welcome aboard, Admiral. I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Liberty. This is my crew." Admiral Zixtara looked around the bridge with what seemed like disappointment. "This is your command center?" "It is quite temple. We like to keep things practical," Jake replied. "Practical," the Admiral repeated, like it was a foreign concept. "Yes, well, primitives often lack appreciation for proper ceremony and grandeur." He adjusted his crown, which wobbled dangerously. "I am here to evaluate your species for potential integration into our glorious empire." "Integration?" Lisa asked. "Yes, you will be assigned a classification based on your usefulness. Your strongest individuals will become laborers. Your most intelligent will serve as clerks and minor administrators. Your leaders will be replaced with proper Imperial governors." Jake exchanged glances with his crew. "And what if we're not interested in joining your empire?" Admiral Zixthara's eyes grew wider. "Not interested?" That is not an option. All species must serve the Empire. It is the natural order of the galaxy. Says who? Pete asked. Says the Empire, of course. We have brought peace and order to thousands of worlds. We have eliminated the chaos of independence and the weakness of democracy. Dr. Foster stepped forward. What about the people on those worlds? Are they happy? Happiness is irrelevant. Order is what matters. Under Imperial rule, everyone knows their place. There's no confusion, no debate, no wasteful arguing about decisions. Sounds boring, Pete muttered. Admiral Zixthara's crown tilted as he turned to look at Pete. You dare to question the Imperial system? I'm not questioning it, Pete said. With a grin, I'm just saying it sounds really, really boring. The Admiral seemed confused by this response. Boring? The Empire spans half the galaxy. Our fleets number in the millions. Our technology is supreme. If you say so, Jake said diplomatically. Would you like a tour of our ship? A tour? Admiral Zixthara straightened his crown again. Yes, that would be appropriate. I will need to assess your primitive technology for the Imperial records. As they walked through the corridors of the Liberty, Jake noticed that the Admiral had to duck every time they went through a doorway. His crown kept hitting the ceiling and he had to adjust it constantly. This is our engineering section, Jake said as they entered a large room filled with humming machinery. Pete was already there, working on a control panel. Hey, Captain, just finished tuning the warp core. We should be able to hit about 50 times light speed now. Admiral Zixthara stopped walking. 50 times light speed? Yeah, not bad for a Tuesday, Pete said casually. Though I think I can squeeze out maybe 60 if I adjust the quantum resonance chambers. The Admiral's crown slipped slightly. Our fastest ships achieve 20 times light speed. And only with massive energy expenditure. Really? Huh. Pete looked genuinely surprised. That seems pretty slow for an empire that spans half the galaxy. Our ships are built for endurance and majesty, not mere speed, the Admiral said quickly. Sure, Pete agreed. Different priorities, I guess. They continued the tour, visiting the medical bay where Dr. Foster was running routine diagnostics on the ship's automated systems. Sorry about the mess, Amy said, gesturing to what looked like a perfectly clean and organized room. We don't really have much medical equipment because we don't get sick very often. You don't get sick? The Admiral asked. Nah, we figured out most diseases decades ago. Nanobots handle the small stuff, and we've got genetic treatments for the big problems, Amy shrugged. Basic preventive medicine, really. Admiral Zixthara's translator seemed to be having trouble with some of the concepts. Nanobots, genetic treatments? These are advanced technologies. Are they? Amy looked surprised. I guess we just thought of them as normal medical care. When they reached the ship's defensive systems, Lieutenant Ben Hayes was calibrating the particle cannons. Just routine maintenance, Ben explained. These are our basic defensive weapons. Each cannon can probably take out a small moon if we really need to, but mostly we use them for mining asteroids. Admiral Zixthara stared at the weapons array. You use planet-destroying weapons for mining? Well, when you need to break up a really big asteroid, you need something with a little punch. Ben said matter-of-factly. The Admiral's crown had tilted so far it was almost falling off. These weapons are more powerful than our primary battleship cannons. Huh? Ben said. Well, like I said, they're just our basic defensive systems. We've got better stuff if we really need it. Admiral Zixthara looked like he was having trouble processing this information. His crown finally slipped completely, and he had to catch it with 2 of his 4 hands. Perhaps, he said slowly, I should return to my ship to file my initial report. Of course, Jake said pleasantly. Take your time. We're not going anywhere. As the Admiral's hologram faded away, the crew of the Liberty finally allowed themselves to laugh. Did you see his face when Pete mentioned the warp speed? Lisa giggled. I liked the part where he had to keep catching his crown, Amy added. Jake shook his head, still smiling. I have a feeling this is going to be an interesting first contact. Admiral Zixthara returned to his ship with his crown clutched in his hands and his mind spinning with confusion. He had expected to find a primitive species cowering in fear, desperate to prove their worth to the mighty Galactic Empire. Instead, he had found humans who treated him like a curious visitor rather than a conquering lord. "Status report," he demanded as he entered the bridge of his flagship, the Imperial Dominator. "Sir, our scans of the human vessel are disturbing," reported his science officer, a thin creature named Kixler whose skin changed colors when he was nervous. Right now, Kixler was a bright orange, which meant he was very worried indeed. "Disturbing how?" "Their ship's hull is made of materials we don't recognize. The energy readings from their power source are off our measurement scales. And sir, their weapons—" Kixler turned an even brighter orange. "Their weapons could destroy our entire fleet." Admiral Zixthara felt his crown slipping again. "That's impossible." "They're primitives. Look at their ship. It's so plain, so simple." "That's just it, sir. They don't waste energy on decorative hull plating or ceremonial spikes. Every part of their ship serves a function. It's actually quite efficient." Meanwhile, back on the Liberty, Captain Morrison was having his own meeting with his senior staff. "So what do we think?" Jake asked as they gathered in the conference room. "They're like children playing dress-up," Lisa said, shaking her head. "All that ceremony and fancy clothing, but their technology is decades behind ours. Centuries behind," Pete corrected. "Did you see how excited their admiral got when I mentioned our warp speed? It's like they've never heard of efficient engine design." Dr. Foster pulled up some readings on her tablet. I managed to scan their representative during his visit. "Their biology is fascinating, but their medical technology seems to be stuck in the Dark Ages. They probably still use surgical procedures for things we fix with a simple injection." "The question is," Jake said, "what do we do about it? They seem to think they're in charge of this whole sector of space." Before anyone could answer, the communication system chimed again. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the Imperial vessel. They're requesting permission to send over a full diplomatic team." Jake sighed. "Tell them they're welcome aboard." An hour later, the Liberty's cargo bay was filled with the strangest diplomatic mission any of them had ever seen. Admiral Zixthara had arrived with a dozen other aliens, each one dressed in elaborate robes and carrying ceremonial items that seemed to serve no practical purpose. There was Sub-Administrator Vexnari, a creature with tentacles instead of arms who kept dropping the scrolls she was trying to carry. Trade Coordinator Klaxonim had so many jeweled chains around his neck that he clinked when he walked. Military Advisor Krextos carried a ceremonial sword that was so ornate it probably couldn't cut butter. "Greetings again, primitive humans." Admiral Zixthara announced, his crown now secured with what looked like a chin strap. "We are here to conduct a full Imperial evaluation of your species." "Great," Jake said with a smile. "Where would you like to start?" The aliens had prepared a long list of tests and evaluations, but the humans quickly turned it into an informal tour. Pete Collins led the technology assessment, still munching on his sandwich from lunch. "This is our main computer core," Pete said, pointing to a wall of softly glowing panels. "Nothing too fancy, just processes about 1 billion calculations per second." Kixler, who had joined the tour, started turning purple. 1 billion calculations per second? Our most advanced systems manage about 10 million. Really? Pete looked genuinely surprised. Well, I guess different species develop differently. He took another bite of his sandwich. "Want to see the replicators?" The replicators were what really broke the aliens' understanding of human technology. Pete demonstrated by asking the machine to create a perfect copy of his sandwich. The replicator reads the molecular structure of any object and rebuilds it from basic particles. Pete explained as the machine hummed and produced an identical sandwich. "We mostly use them for food and basic supplies, but they can make pretty much anything." Trade Coordinator Klaxonim's jeweled chains clinked frantically as he shook with excitement. "You can create matter from energy? This is impossible." "Not really," Pete said with a shrug. "Einstein figured out the energy matter Relationship centuries ago. We just built a machine to make it work in reverse. But the energy requirements ... Our fusion reactors put out plenty of power. Pete offered the newly created sandwich to Claxonum. Want a bite? It's turkey and cheese. The aliens spent the next hour trying to understand how humans had solved the energy crisis. Dr. Foster joined them in the ship's power center, a surprisingly small room with a few quietly humming machines. "This is it?" asked Admiral Zixthara, looking around the modest space. "Yep, one fusion reactor, fully automated. Produces enough energy to power a small city." Amy checked a readout on her tablet. "We're running at about 12% capacity." "Right now? 12%? Well, we're just cruising through space. If we needed to do something energy-intensive, like fight a battle or terraform a planet, we'd ramp up to maybe 30%. Military advisor Krextos, who had been quietly calculating, suddenly spoke up. "Your single reactor produces more energy than our entire fleet. Does it?" Amy looked thoughtful. "I guess that makes sense. We've been using fusion power for about 200 years. You probably have some other energy source?" "We use controlled matter-antimatter reactions," Krextos said proudly. "Oh," Amy tried to look impressed. "That sounds ... dangerous." "Dangerous but powerful," the military advisor said. "If you say so. We tried antimatter reactions a long time ago, but they seemed like more trouble than they were worth. Too much. Risk of accidental explosions." The cultural exchange was even more confusing for the aliens. Anthropologist Dr. Kate Murphy had joined the tour and was trying to explain human society to Sub-Administrator Vexnari. "So you have no emperor?" Vexnari asked, her tentacles writhing in distress. "Nope, we elect our leaders, and if they mess up, we vote them out and try someone else." "But how do you maintain order without absolute authority?" Kate smiled. "Well, we found that people generally behave better when they have a say in their own government. It's not perfect, but it works pretty well." "This is chaos," Vexnari muttered. "How do people know what to do if there's no one to tell them?" "They figure it out. People are pretty smart when you give them a chance." The economic discussion left Trade Coordinator Claxonum even more confused. When he learned that humans had eliminated poverty and homelessness, he nearly fainted. "But how do you motivate workers without the threat of starvation?" He gasped. "Turns out people like to work when they're doing something interesting," Captain Morrison explained. "When you don't have to worry about basic survival, you can focus on what you're actually good at." "This is madness," Claxonum whispered. "Our entire economy is based on scarcity and competition." "Sounds stressful," Jake said sympathetically. The social structure discussion was the final straw for the aliens. Commander Park explained how humans had moved beyond rigid hierarchies to a flexible cooperation based on expertise and situation. "So, your warriors can become scientists?" Admiral Zixthara asked, his crown tilting dangerously again. "Sure, and our scientists can become leaders or artists or whatever they want to try. We like to keep things flexible." "But how do you maintain discipline? How do you ensure loyalty?" "People tend to be loyal to systems that treat them well," Lisa said simply. "It's not that complicated." By the end of the tour, the alien delegation looked shell-shocked. They had come expecting to evaluate a primitive species, but instead found themselves completely outclassed in every area. Admiral Zixthara gathered his team in the cargo bay. "We need to return to our ship immediately," he announced. "I must contact the Imperial High Command." "Of course," Jake said pleasantly. "Feel free to visit again anytime." As the aliens prepared to beam back to their ship, Pete called out, "Hey, if you need any spare parts or anything, just let us know. We can probably replicate whatever you need." The aliens stared at him in silence. "I mean it," Pete continued. "No charge. We've got plenty of raw materials." Admiral Zixthara's crown finally fell off completely. He caught it with one hand while staring at Pete with a mixture of confusion and fear. "No charge?" He whispered. "Sure, why would we charge you? It's just basic courtesy." The aliens beamed away without another word, leaving the humans alone in the cargo bay. Well, Jake said after a moment, that was interesting. I think we broke them, Lisa observed. Probably just culture shock, Dr. Foster said. It's hard to adjust when everything you believe about the universe turns out to be wrong, Jake nodded. Oh, let's just hope they're reasonable about it. On the Imperial Dominator, Admiral Zixthara sat in his command chair with his crown in his lap, staring at the readings his science team had collected. Sir, Kixler said nervously, what do we do now? Admiral Zixthara was quiet for a long moment. I have no idea. Admiral Zixthara sat in his private quarters aboard the Imperial Dominator, staring at his crown. The elaborate headpiece lay on his desk, looking somehow smaller and more ridiculous than it had that morning. He had been trying to write his report to the Imperial High Command for 3 hours, but every time he started, the words seemed wrong. How could he explain that the primitive species they had come to evaluate was actually more advanced than the Empire in every possible way? How could he tell his superiors that these humans had technology that made Imperial science look like children playing with toys? A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to his quarters. Come in, he called. Administrator Vexnari entered, her tentacles drooping with exhaustion. Sir, I've been trying to complete the cultural assessment report, but I'm having difficulties. What kind of difficulties? Well, sir, they don't fit into any of our standard categories. They're not a warrior society, but they have incredible weapons. They're not ruled by merchants, but they have unlimited resources. They're not governed by priests, but they seem to have some kind of moral system that actually works. Admiral Zixthara rubbed his temples. What about their social structure? Surely they have some kind of hierarchy we can understand. That's just it, sir. They do and they don't. Vexnari sat down heavily. They have leaders, but the leaders don't have absolute power. They have experts, but the experts don't rule over everyone else. They have workers, but the workers can become leaders if they want to. That makes no sense. I know, sir. I've been studying imperial social structures for 50 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Meanwhile, back on the Liberty, the humans were having their own discussion about the strange visitors. The senior staff had gathered in the conference room to share their observations. They're so focused on ceremony and appearance, Dr. Foster said, that Admiral's crown probably weighs more than our entire computer core. Did you notice how confused they got when we offered to help them for free? Pete asked. It's like they've never heard of just being nice to people. Captain Morrison nodded. Their whole system seems to be based on fear and control. Everyone knows their exact place in the hierarchy and nobody questions it. Must be exhausting, Lisa observed. All that energy spent on maintaining artificial divisions instead of actually solving problems. Dr. Kate Murphy, who had been taking notes throughout their encounter with the aliens, looked up from her tablet. I think we need to understand that they're not evil people. They're trapped in a system that doesn't allow them to see alternatives. What do you mean? Jake asked. Think about it. Admiral Zixthara has probably spent his entire life believing that the only way to organize society is through rigid hierarchy and absolute authority. The idea that people might cooperate voluntarily probably seems impossible to him. So what do we do about it? Maybe we just keep being ourselves, Kate suggested. Sometimes the best way to change someone's mind is to show them a better example. The next day, the aliens requested another meeting. This time, they came with specific questions about human society. Admiral Zixthara had replaced his enormous crown with a simpler headband, though he still wore his elaborate robes. We would like to understand your governmental system, he announced as the delegation gathered in the Liberty's conference room. Sure, Jake said. What would you like to know? How do you make decisions without a supreme leader? Well, we talk about things until we find a solution that works for everyone. It takes longer sometimes, but the decisions usually stick because everyone had input. Sub-Administrator Vexnari leaned forward with her tentacles writhing nervously. But what if people disagree? What if there's no consensus? Then we vote, Lisa explained. Everyone gets one vote regardless of their job or background? Majority wins, but we try to protect minority rights too, Majority wins? Admiral Zixthara looked puzzled. But what if the majority is wrong? Then we try something else? Jake said with a shrug. The nice thing about democracy is that it's self-correcting. If a leader or policy doesn't work, people vote for change. Trade Coordinator Klaxonim had been unusually quiet, but now he spoke up. This system of yours where everyone has enough resources, does it work? Dr. Foster pulled up some basic diagrams on the conference room screen. We automated most production decades ago. Machines do the repetitive work, leaving people free to focus on creative and intellectual tasks. But how do you distribute goods? Who decides who gets what? People take what they need, Amy said simply. When you can make anything from basic materials, scarcity becomes artificial. But surely some people try to hoard resources? Why would they? If you can make whatever you need whenever you need it, there's no point in stockpiling. Klaxonim's jeweled chains clinked as he shook his head. But competition drives innovation. Without scarcity, why would anyone work to improve things? Pete had been listening from the back of the room. Because improving things is fun, he said. I spend my free time working on engine modifications because I enjoy solving puzzles. Amy develops new medical treatments because she likes helping people. We don't need artificial pressure to be creative. Military advisor Krextos, who had been studying the Liberty's defensive systems, raised his own question. Your weapons are incredibly advanced, yet you don't seem to use them for conquest. Why? What would be the point? Lisa asked. We have everything we need. Why would we want to take things from other people? But surely your species has aggressive instincts? The drive to dominate? Some individuals do, but we've learned to channel those instincts into productive competition. Sports, games, scientific challenges. People can compete without hurting each other. The aliens spent hours asking questions, each answer seeming to confuse them more. They couldn't understand how a society could function without strict hierarchies. Artificial scarcity and the threat of punishment. Finally, Admiral Zixthara asked the question that had been bothering him most. If your system is so effective, why haven't you tried to spread it to other species? Who says we haven't? Jake replied, We share our ideas with anyone who's interested. But we don't force change on people. That would make us just another empire. But surely you could improve the lives of billions of beings across the galaxy? Probably. But lasting change has to come from within. If we conquered the empire and imposed our system, it would just be another form of tyranny. Dr. Murphy leaned forward. The best we can do is offer an example. Show people that there are other ways to organize society. Let them decide for themselves what they want to adopt. The aliens fell silent, absorbing this information. After a long moment, Vexnari spoke up. On my homeworld, we have a saying, the fish does not know it swims in water until it jumps into air. That's beautiful, Kate said. What does it mean? It means sometimes you don't realize you have choices until you see someone making different ones. Admiral Zixthara stood up slowly, his simplified headband catching the light. We need to return to our ship. I have a report to file. Of course, Jake said. You're welcome back any time. As the aliens prepared to leave, young engineer Ben Hayes called out, Hey, if any of you want to learn about our technology, I'd be happy to show you how some of this stuff works. The aliens stopped and stared at him. You would share your advanced technology? Kixtos asked. Sure, why not? Knowledge is meant to be shared. But what about military advantages, strategic superiority? Ben looked confused. What about them? We're not at war with you. But you could be in the future. Could be, I guess. But we'd rather be friends. The aliens beamed back to their ship, in stunned silence, leaving the humans to wonder what would happen next on the Imperial Dominator. Admiral Zixthara called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. They gathered in the war room, surrounded by maps of Imperial territory and displays of military strength. I need your honest assessments, the Admiral said. Based on what we've observed, what are our options? Military advisor Krextos spoke first. From a strategic standpoint, we have no options. They could destroy our entire fleet without taking damage. Any military action would be suicide. What about diplomacy? Asked Vexnari. They're already being diplomatic, Claxonym pointed out. More diplomatic than we deserve, considering we came here threatening them. Then what do we do? Admiral Zixthara looked around the room at his advisors. For the first time in his career, he didn't have an answer that fit Imperial doctrine. I think, he said slowly, we need to contact the High Command and tell them the truth, which is that everything we thought we knew about running a civilization is wrong. Admiral Zixthara stood before the massive holographic display in his ship's communication room, trying to find the courage to contact the Imperial High Command. He had been staring at the activation switch for 20 minutes, and his simplified headband was starting to feel heavier than his old crown. Behind him, his senior staff waited nervously. They all knew that this conversation would change everything. Sub-Administrator Vexnari's tentacles were wrapped tightly around herself, and Trade Coordinator Claxonym had removed most of his jewelry to stop the anxious CLINK. Finally, Admiral Zixthara pressed the button. The display flickered to life, showing the imposing figure of Supreme Commander Draxel, the military leader of the entire Galactic Empire. Draxel was a massive creature with thick, armored skin and eyes that glowed red when he was angry. Right. Now, they were glowing very red indeed. Admiral Zixthara, Draxel's voice boomed through the communication system. Your report is 3 days overdue. I trust you have completed the evaluation of the primitive species and are ready to begin. Integration procedures? Sir, the situation is complicated. Complicated? What is complicated about evaluating primitives? Assess their technology, catalog their resources, assign them classifications, and begin tribute collection. Standard procedure. Admiral Zixthara took a deep breath. Sir, they're not primitive. Excuse me? The humans, sir, they're not primitive. In fact, they're more advanced than we are. The display went silent for a long moment. Then Supreme Commander Draxel leaned forward, his red eyes growing brighter. Explain. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Their weapons could destroy our entire fleet. Their energy production makes our systems look like toys. And sir, they have something else. What? They've eliminated poverty, disease, and scarcity. Their society functions without the need for imperial control or rigid hierarchies. Supreme Commander Draxel's eyes were now glowing so brightly they seemed to light up the display. That's impossible. I have detailed scans and recordings, sir. Everything is documented. Send me the data immediately. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Admiral Zixthara and his team in uncomfortable silence. They all knew that Supreme Commander Draxel would not take this news well. 2 hours later, the communication system activated again. This time, the display showed not just Supreme Commander Draxel, but the entire Imperial High Council. 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy stared out from the screen, and none of them looked happy. Admiral Zixthara, said High Counselor Mixara, an ancient creature whose voice sounded like grinding stone. We have reviewed your data. We find it disturbing. Yes, sir. You claim these humans have technology that surpasses our own. You claim they have eliminated the fundamental problems that plague all civilizations. You claim they function without proper imperial authority. That's correct, sir. And yet they have not attempted to conquer us? No, sir. In fact, they offered to help us. They said they would share their technology freely if we were interested. The council members exchanged glances. High Counselor Tixner spoke next. Admiral, do you understand what you're suggesting? If these claims are true, it would mean that our entire system of government is necessary. I understand that's how it appears, sir. Supreme Commander Draxel leaned forward aggressively. What about their military capabilities? Surely they must be planning some kind of attack. Military Advisor Crextos stepped forward nervously. Sir, if I may. Their military capabilities are defensive in nature. They seem to have no interest in conquest or expansion. That makes no sense. All advanced species seek to expand their territory. Apparently not, sir. They seemed content to explore and learn. Trade Coordinator Claxonham was trembling as he added his own report. Sir, their economic system. They've solved scarcity. They can create anything they need from basic materials. They don't understand the concept of tribute or taxation because they don't need to take resources from other people. High Counselor Jigsash, who oversaw imperial economics, looked confused. But how do you motivate people to work without the threat of starvation or poverty? They say people work better when they're doing things they enjoy, sir. When basic needs are met, individuals pursue their interests and talents. Chaos, muttered High Counselor Mixara. Pure chaos. Sub-administrator? Vexnari unwrapped one tentacle to speak. Sir, they offered to teach us their governmental system. They said all beings deserve the right to choose their own leaders and determine their own futures. The silence that followed was deafening. The concept was so foreign to the imperial mindset that several council members seemed unable to process it. Finally, Supreme Commander Draxel spoke. Admiral, you will maintain position and observe these humans. Do not engage in any further cultural exchange. We need time to determine how to respond to this ... situation. Sir, they've invited us back anytime we want to visit. You will not accept their invitation. You will observe from a distance and report any changes in their behavior. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Zixtara staring at a blank screen. His team looked at him with a mixture of confusion and concern. Sir, asked Kixler, what do we do now? Admiral Zixtara sat down heavily in his command chair. We follow orders. We observe and we wait. But following orders was becoming more difficult by the hour. The humans kept trying to establish friendly communication. Captain Morrison sent cheerful messages asking if the Imperial delegation needed anything. Engineer Pete Collins transmitted technical specifications for improved engine designs. Dr. Foster offered medical assistance. If any of the Imperial crew needed treatment, the messages were innocent and helpful, but they were having a devastating effect on Imperial morale. Crew members started asking questions that had never been asked before. Why don't we have medical technology like theirs? Asked a junior engineer. Why do we need all these layers of command when they seem to manage fine with simple cooperation? Wondered a communications officer. Why are we trying to conquer people who just want to be friends? Asked a weapons specialist. Admiral Zixtara found himself unable to answer these questions. The standard Imperial responses about order, hierarchy, and the natural right of the strong to rule over the weak suddenly sounded hollow and outdated. The situation got worse when news of the encounter began to spread throughout the Empire. Despite orders to maintain communication silence, word traveled through the Imperial fleet about the humans and their impossible society. Within days, Admiral Zixtara was receiving urgent communications from Imperial governors across the galaxy. Species that had been peacefully subjugated for centuries were asking uncomfortable questions about human-style democracy and resource sharing. The Centauri Coalition sent a formal inquiry asking why they needed to pay tribute when the humans could apparently create unlimited resources from nothing. The Rigel Confederacy wanted to know why they couldn't elect their own leaders like the humans did. The Vega territories requested information about human medical technology that could eliminate disease. Each message made it clearer that the Empire's authority was being questioned for the first time in 1,000 years. The mere existence of an alternative to imperial rule was enough to shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Admiral Zixtara was reviewing the latest batch of troubling reports when his personal communication system chimed. The message was from his own homeworld. From his family. Beloved brother, the message began. It was from his sister Lixara, who worked as a mid-level administrator on their home planet. We have heard rumors about a species that has eliminated poverty and disease. Is this true? Our children are asking why they must work in the processing plants while others live in luxury? They want to know why we cannot choose our own planetary leaders. Please tell us what you have learned. Admiral Zixtara stared at the message for a long time. His sister's children were questioning the imperial system. His own family was starting to see through the lies that held the empire together. He looked around his command center, with its elaborate decorations and ceremonial designs that served no practical purpose. He thought about his crew, forced to live in rigid hierarchy where creativity and innovation were discouraged in favor of obedience and conformity. For the first time in his life, Admiral Zixthara began to wonder if the humans were right and the Empire was wrong. He activated his personal log and began to record. Day 4 of human observation. The situation continues to deteriorate. The mere knowledge that an alternative exists is destabilizing imperial authority across multiple sectors. I am beginning to believe that we are facing not just a diplomatic crisis, but the potential collapse of everything we have built. He paused, then added quietly, and I'm not sure that would be a bad thing. 3 weeks after the first encounter with humans, the Galactic Empire was falling apart. Admiral Zixthara sat in his quarters reading the latest reports from across Imperial space. Every day brought new problems. The Tau Ceti colonies had declared independence and requested human assistance in setting up democratic governments. The mining worlds in the Proxima sector had stopped sending tribute and were asking for human replicator technology instead. Even the Imperial capital world was experiencing unprecedented civil unrest. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Admiral Zixthara activated his communication system and saw the familiar face of Captain Morrison appearing on his screen. "Admiral, how are you doing?" Jake asked with genuine concern. "We haven't heard from you in a while." "Captain Morrison." Admiral Zixthara replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I am managing. You look tired. Everything okay?" Admiral Zixthara almost laughed. Everything was not okay. His entire civilization was crumbling because humans had accidentally shown the galaxy a better way to live. But he found himself answering honestly. "Captain, may I ask you a question?" "Sure, go ahead." "When your species first developed democracy and eliminated scarcity, did you realize you were destroying other forms of government?" Jake looked puzzled. "Destroying? I wouldn't say we destroyed anything. We just found ways that worked better for us, but surely you knew that other species would want to copy your methods." "We hoped they would if our methods helped them." "Why would we want to keep good ideas to ourselves?" Admiral Zixthara stared at the screen. "You hoped they would copy you?" "Of course. The more civilizations that are prosperous and free, the better the galaxy becomes for everyone. Even if it means the end of existing power structures." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Admiral, I think you're asking if we feel bad about empires falling apart when people learn they have other choices?" "Yes." "No, we don't feel bad about that. Systems that depend on keeping people ignorant and oppressed probably deserve to fall apart." The honesty of the answer hit Admiral Zixthara like a physical blow. The humans genuinely didn't care that their existence was destroying the Empire. They thought it was a good thing. "What about the chaos?" Admiral Zixthara asked. "The disorder that comes with change?" "Change is messy," Jake agreed, "but it's usually worth it in the end. People figure things out when they're free to try different approaches." After the conversation ended, Admiral Zixthara sat in his dark quarters thinking about chaos and order. Outside his windows, he could see protest ships gathering around the Imperial Dominator. Citizens from a dozen different species had come to demand answers about human society and why they couldn't have the same freedoms. Meanwhile, on the Liberty, Captain Morrison was dealing with his own unexpected situation. The ship's communication system was constantly busy with calls from alien civilizations across the galaxy. "Captain," Lieutenant Ben Hayes called from his station, "we're getting another request for information about democratic governments. This one's from the Vegan Assembly." "Put them through," Jake said. The main screen lit up with the image of Representative Kilmara, a tall, graceful being with silver skin and large, intelligent eyes. "Captain Morrison, we have heard that your species practices something called democracy. Is it true that your people choose their own leaders?" "Yes, that's right. We hold elections where everyone gets to vote for who they think would do the best job. And these leaders can be removed if they perform poorly? Absolutely. In fact, that happens pretty regularly. Representative Kilmara's eyes grew wider. This is remarkable. On our world, we have been subjects of the Empire for 300 years. We have never been allowed to choose our own path. What would you like to know about setting up democratic systems? Everything. These conversations were happening dozens of times every day. Species that had been part of the Empire for centuries were learning that they didn't have to accept imperial rule. They could govern themselves, create their own prosperity, and choose their own futures. Dr. Kate Murphy had started conducting what she called democracy workshops over subspace communication. She would explain basic concepts like voting, representation, and civil rights to eager audiences of aliens who had never heard such ideas before. The key thing to remember, Kate explained to a group of beings from the Rigel system, is that government should serve the people, not the other way around. But how do you prevent chaos and disorder? Asked one of the listeners. You create systems that channel disagreement into productive discussion instead of violence. People can argue about policies without fighting wars. Engineer Pete Collins had started his own informal tech-sharing program. When alien species asked about replicator technology or fusion power, he would send them detailed technical specifications. Won't this upset the balance of power in the galaxy? Commander Park asked him. Probably, Pete replied cheerfully. But everyone having enough food and energy seems more important than maintaining some artificial balance. Dr. Foster was getting requests for medical assistance from across the galaxy. Species that had suffered from preventable diseases for millennia were learning that humans had simple solutions to problems the Empire had never bothered to solve. The Empire's response was predictable and desperate. Supreme Commander Draxel issued proclamations declaring human ideas to be dangerous propaganda. Imperial governors were ordered to suppress any discussion of democracy or resource sharing. Military fleets were dispatched to rebellious worlds to restore order, but it was too late. The idea had spread too far and too fast. When Imperial forces tried to suppress democratic movements, they found themselves facing not just local rebels, but well-informed populations who knew exactly what they were fighting for. The breaking point came when Admiral Zixtara received a direct order from the Imperial High Command to destroy the human ship. You will eliminate the source of this contamination immediately, Supreme Commander Draxel commanded during an emergency communication. Use whatever force is necessary. Admiral Zixtara looked at his senior staff. They all knew what would happen if they attacked the Liberty. The humans would defend themselves, and the Imperial fleet would be destroyed in minutes. But more than that, Admiral Zixtara realized he didn't want to attack them. The humans had been nothing but helpful and friendly. They had offered to share their knowledge freely. They had treated the Imperial delegation with respect and courtesy, even when the Empire had come to threaten them. Sir, Admiral Zixtara said slowly, I request permission to resign my commission. The silence on the communication channel was deafening. You what? Supreme Commander Draxel finally managed. I resign. I will not order an attack on beings who have done nothing but try to help us. One by one, his senior staff stepped forward and echoed his words. Sub-Administrator Vexnari, Trade Coordinator Klaxonum, Military Advisor Krextos, and Science Officer Kixler all formally resigned their Imperial commissions within hours. News of the mass resignation spread throughout the Imperial fleet. Other ships began reporting similar resignations. Imperial authority simply collapsed as personnel at every level refused to fight against people who represented everything they wished their own society could become. Admiral Zixtara, now just Citizen Zixtara, sent a message to Captain Morrison. Captain, I would like to request asylum. My crew and I no longer wish to serve an empire that fears the happiness of its own people. Jake's response was immediate. Of course, you're welcome to join us, or we can help you and your people find a good place to start over. Within a year, the Galactic Empire had completely dissolved. Most former imperial worlds declared independence and began experimenting with democratic governments. Some succeeded immediately, others struggled for a while before finding systems that worked for them. But all of them were free to try. The humans, for their part, continued exploring the galaxy, accidentally inspiring democratic revolutions wherever they went. They established the Galactic Cooperation Council, a loose association of free worlds that shared resources and knowledge without requiring political submission. Former Admiral Zixthara settled on a small agricultural world, where he opened a restaurant specializing in foods from across the galaxy. He kept his old imperial crown on display with a small sign that read, "Some things are too heavy to wear." The galaxy became a much more interesting place once everyone stopped trying to conquer each other and started actually cooperating. Trade flourished, science advanced rapidly, and art and culture spread freely between worlds. The former Galactic Empire was remembered mainly as a cautionary tale about the dangers of taking yourself too seriously and the folly of trying to control what people thought. As for the humans, they kept exploring, kept learning, and kept accidentally revolutionizing galactic civilization just by being decent to everyone they met. They never stopped finding the universe hilarious, and somehow that made it a better place for everyone. Years later, when asked about the fall of the Empire, Captain Morrison would shrug and say, "We didn't destroy anything. We just gave people permission to laugh at things that weren't really that funny to begin with."